Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Kennedy in for Chessie McNeil. This is The Take, where we go beyond the headlines and look at why and how stories are impacting your community. Experts will share what they know and we'll have a little fun too. But we start with breaking news this morning. NBC News is reporting that former Vice President Dick Cheney has died. He served as the 46th Vice President of the United States under President George W. Bush. Before that, he was White House Chief of Staff, a congressman from Wyoming, and Secretary of Defense during Operation Desert Storm in 1991. Cheney had suffered several heart attacks beginning in his late 30s and had underwent a heart transplant in 2012. Again, NBC News reporting that former Vice President Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84. Let's get some new reaction on his passing with Andra Gillespie, professor of political science at Emory University. Andra, thank you for joining us on this topic today. You know, when we think about Dick Cheney's legacy, 84 years, how do you think he'll be remembered?
He'll likely be remembered as one of the most powerful vice presidents in U.S. history. His path to, I guess, the Naval Observatory was a different one. He was actually the chair of the committee that was tasked with trying to find a vice presidential candidate for George W. Bush in 2000. And then he ends up becoming the vice presidential nominee and then vice president. As vice president, he was selected for the ticket in part because he balanced out what was perceived as George W. Bush's inexperience, but he certainly brought his neoconservative values, especially after the 9/11 attacks, to the forefront. And he pushed forward a foreign policy that was interventionist, that was preemptive, and that certainly had America engaged in the world. He will, really be remembered as having a lot more influence over the vice presidency than other vice presidents, and having really set the stage. Even though there are ways that you could argue that Al Gore did this before him, but really setting the stage for the vice president to be an important player in the president's team and not just the person who is kind of standing and waiting in case something happens to, the commander in chief.
You know, when you talk about just how powerful he was as VP, I've heard some people say it was almost like a chief of staff role, which he actually had during the Ford administration. What do you think made him so influential specifically compared to some of those other VPs? What kind of decisions was he making behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, you look at the war on terror and how it is being laid out. Dick Cheney is the one who was in the room, and he is the one with the experience. Like, he was chosen because George W. Bush didn't have a whole lot of foreign policy experience. There's an age difference between the two gentlemen. And so even though he looked and perhaps seemed and carried himself as being even being older than he in fact was relative to George W. Bush, he was seen as being the one who brought gravitas to that ticket when people were not necessarily taking George W. Bush seriously. And when 9/11 happened and we were in a new paradigm in terms of the war on terror, it was his framing and his ideas certainly played a very, very influential role in shaping how the U.S., invaded Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think for that reason you could call him a war hawk. Do you still see any elements of his worldview or governing philosophy in today's Republican Party, or has it just moved in kind of a completely different direction when we're talking about foreign policy specifically?
Well, I mean, yeah, we can see that, especially amongst some proponents of America First, there's a strain of isolationism. I mean, we have to look at the engagement that President Trump has had around the world to understand that is not exactly how we're moving, but we're not moving in terms of sort of the neoconservative turn that was prevalent during the Bush administration. And in fact, if you listen to certain people who are, part of the administration or who are serving in Congress now, they do tend to speak of neoconservatives as one being relics of a bygone era, but they also speak of their policy positions as being, in a critical way. I think one of the lasting legacies of Dick Cheney is not just kind of how he served in the Ford administration or the first Bush administration or the second Bush administration. It's also how he ends his life. And so he will also be remembered as standing alongside his daughter, Liz Cheney, and endorsing Kamala Harris for president in 2024 because of their concerns about the rule of law and their concerns about what power would look like, under a second Trump administration. So he is certainly somebody who, evolved and was pragmatic over time. He's also somebody who stayed pretty true to his principles, even if they weren't necessarily what was the dominant paradigm of the day.
Yeah, I think his quote to be exact, last year was that Donald Trump can never be trusted with power again, when he was specifically talking about the insurrection. You mentioned he stood behind his daughter, Liz Cheney, a congresswoman at the time, as she took on the president over that insurrection. But then he also stood behind his other daughter, Mary Cheney, who is openly gay. He came out in 2009, declared his support for same-sex marriage at the state level. So that's two examples right there of him kind of breaking with the Republican Party to stand with his family. What do you think that reveals about Dick Cheney, the family man?
Well, I mean, this is a man who cared about his two daughters, who cared about his grandchildren. And, you know, it wasn't a secret, you know, that Mary Cheney was gay. Her partner, now wife, I believe, you know, was at the inauguration when he was sworn in 2001. And so you could see his evolution on this issue was actually born out of his personal experience and wanting to support, you know, both of his children, you know, not just the one who was in the heterosexual marriage.
You know, Andra, Cheney's certainly a polarizing figure, but almost it might have been a little different from the polarization that we're used to today, when everyone is just so divided. But he was here serving at a time, again, Ford administration, George W. Bush administration. Was it kind of different then with just how polarizing he was? I mean, how would you put that into context now in the wake of his passing?
You know, I haven't had a chance to look at social media to see how social media is reacting to the death of Dick Cheney. I think it's important to point out that in terms of domestic polarization, this is something that scholars can trace back more than a generation. There are elements of it that are starting in the 1970s. And certainly Dick Cheney was a polarizing figure, in part because he, you know, was very steady in terms of his beliefs, and he was willing to move forward with things even if they garnered controversy. So, you know, in particular during the War on Terror, he was supportive of aggressive interrogation techniques that included waterboarding. There's some people who argue that those are illegal, and he wasn't swayed in that. So there are always going to be people who are going to be critical of some of his foreign policy stances. But there will also be people who will compare him to the Trump administration, and they might actually kind of have a softer view of him because of who they are comparing him to, especially if they're vehemently opposed to what they see happening in the Trump administration. At the end of the day, despite kind of, you know, the departure that he may have arguably taken with respect to torture, he was somebody who had a respect for institutions, a respect for the Constitution, a respect for the rule of law, and that might earn him grudging respect among some people who disagreed with all of his policy stances.
Andra Gillespie, we'll leave it there. From Emory University, thank you so much for taking some time. We just got the news a couple hours ago, and we appreciate you jumping on at the last minute to help us make sense of this all. Hey, you're watching The Take. We will have much more from Washington coming up in a live report. We'll be right back. We continue our breaking news coverage of the passing of former Vice President Dick Cheney with NBC's Alice Barr in Washington. Alice, this news just breaking a few hours ago, but how do you think Washington is going to remember the former vice president?
Yeah, he really was a towering figure here in Washington. He's somebody who was kind of a stalwart of Washington politics. He held a number of positions, of course, most notably vice president, and he is seen as one of the most influential vice presidents in modern history. It's a funny role to be vice president. You're often trying to stay a step behind the president, but he really stood alongside President George W. Bush when he was his partner, and was often referred to really as a co-president, which is something that, of course, President Bush bristled against at the time. But that says a lot about how he's being remembered. So there are condolences, of course, flowing in today, and there are also reflections on what was a complicated legacy, because Cheney's also being remembered as an architect of the global war on terrorism and the second Iraq War, while serving, of course, as vice president to George W. Bush. And it was during that time that he really was a forceful presence in that Bush-Cheney administration, and he was seen as steering a lot of the decision-making towards saying that they believe there were weapons of mass destruction, of course, in Iraq, and then going in to begin that war that had, you know, really years and years of consequences to follow, and there never was evidence of weapons of mass destruction found. So that looms very large, certainly, over his legacy. He was also defense secretary under the senior President Bush. He was a defense hawk at that time as well. And before that, he was a U.S. representative from Wyoming. So again, a long history in Washington politics, and one that certainly left a big imprint during his time here.
Yeah, powerful and polarizing, as I've heard it described this morning. He was also at one point defending his daughter Liz Cheney as she was examining Donald Trump's actions surrounding the 2021 insurrection at the Capitol. So what kind of response can we expect from the White House today, if any?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, Liz Cheney, the daughter of Dick Cheney, was one of the most outspoken, has been one of the most outspoken Republican voices against President Trump. She was part of the investigative team of his second impeachment, and she spoke really loudly and forcefully about feeling that he was not the right person to lead the Republican Party. That's something that certainly President Trump has bristled against many times and has spoken out against Liz Cheney. She's no longer, you know, went from being the number 3 member of leadership in the Republican House to not being a member of the House after President Trump campaigned against her. And toward the end of his life, you know, this person who was such a towering conservative figure, Dick Cheney, he actually said that he was going to vote for Kamala Harris in the last presidential elections, you know, standing alongside his daughter Liz Cheney, who actually campaigned with Kamala Harris in the lead up to the last election. So we haven't heard yet from President Trump. You know, he doesn't always take kindly to people who are very outspoken against him. So I'll be interested and now be watching to see if there is a response.
Yeah, Alice, I know it's still early, but are we hearing anything yet on a state funeral or any kind of memorials for him in the coming days there in the nation's capital?
Yeah, I haven't gotten details on that yet, but I do imagine that there will be, you know, a great deal of honoring of his memory. Again, interesting to see how that plays out, depending on how President Trump may respond and whether that has some kind of an influence on the kind of memorials that we see for him here in Washington. But again, really a towering and influential, as you said, a powerful and a polarizing figure here in Washington.
Yeah, Alice, we know you'll keep us apprised of things as you hear them. Thank you so much for this report. And we have plenty more in store for you coming up. This is The Take. As millions of holiday shoppers start loading the virtual carts, the trade backdrop is shifting, especially between the U.S. and Canada. With cross-border supply chains already strained, there is a real risk of higher costs hitting everything from electronics to apparel this year. Let's dig into what that means for the U.S. consumer and U.S. retailers with Vahe Bagdasaryan, the founder and CEO of the marketing service firm Tangent. Vahe, great to be with you this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Dan. Yeah, happy to be here.
So, you know, with all these moves going on between Washington and Ottawa, do you think shoppers are showing any kind of early signs of pulling back this year? Or are we just all trying to adapt to these higher prices and shipping delays?
I think we'll see kind of more things happening when we move towards to the holiday season. But it's important to understand, like, when the prices rose, like, people just don't start not buying. What happens is, like, they start to reprioritize their budget, what they're going to buy. They'll start look for like cheaper alternatives, like subsidies, try to find like a coupons, all of these sort of promotion offers to kind of make sure everything they buy match their budgets. So I think there is going to be a lot of reprioritization, and a lot of consumers going to buy more more like essential goods compared to kind of luxury goods or like a more expensive stuff. Definitely, as we move towards to the holiday season, we'll see a lot of changes to the consumer behavior starting to happen.
You know, one of the great things about this holiday season is we have Black Friday, we have all those Christmas sales. So, I mean, do you think the tariffs are going to be threatening those sales like we're used to them? Is it going to hit just how steep they can drop these prices this year?
I think it's definitely going to have some sort of impact on like Black Friday sales and Cyber Monday sales. I think one of the ways that consumers can avoid like getting hit by like the rising prices, trying to find like products that are like more built in domestically, so they're not affected by like the tariffs. But definitely, like I think when you're going to any of these like e-commerce websites to buy the electronics, for example, or some other goods that are like have to do with a shipment from internationally, et cetera, they might be impacted with and have like a higher prices. So they might feel, if they compare it to the last year or the previous year, they might feel an impact on the prices and that.
Okay. What about the retailers? What are they doing on their part? I mean, I'm sure this comes as no surprise that there are tariffs. The president's been talking about it for months. So have they been doing anything behind the scenes, supply chain wise, to try to minimize tariff exposure?
Yeah, they could. There are a lot of things that the retailers can do, and I believe some of them do. It's like trying, if you're building like a product that have to do with a international shipment, probably moving their like a production to countries who are less affected by tariffs, or try to kind of find substitutes in domestically instead of like bringing them from abroad on like a manufacturing or building them here. So I'm pretty sure like a lot of this doesn't come as a surprise to them, because there've been like. Everybody's talking about this like or at least for several months now. So I think most of the retailers are well prepared to try to kind of minimize the impact on consumer, and also make sure they're going to this holiday season, like the shopping season, like kind of very well prepared.
Well, Vahe, my last question to you: what's your take on the current state of the consumer, and is the optimism enough to keep the holiday sales strong?
Definitely, I feel like optimism alone it's not enough. What they should do is try to do like a good representation of your budget that you want to spend on holiday gifts or during Black Friday, etc., etc. My advice would be try to kind of probably buy goods that you need right now, and try to kind of delay like a big purchases. Like if you're going to buy an electronics or something like this, probably wait until see how the prices will change, and also kind of try to find some alternatives, try to find products that are like alternatives to what you want to buy but are built in domestically, kind of to try to find them like cheaply.
Vahe Bagdasaryan with some advice and news you can use this morning. Thank you so much. Maybe join us again in December, a little closer to Christmas. We have plenty more in store for you coming up.
Sure.
This is The Take. The government shutdown, day 35, now tied for the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Senators are scheduled to vote on the short-term spending bill for the 14th time today. Meanwhile, across Metro Atlanta, the shutdown putting thousands of households at risk, delaying aid for food, housing, and health. And that's where United Way of Greater Atlanta's 211 service steps in to connect families to local help while Washington tries to work it all out. Every year, Metro Atlanta's 211 line fields more than 55,000 requests just for food help. The 211 network serves residents in 13 counties, including Cobb, DeKalb, Fulton, and Gwinnett. And to meet diverse needs from housing to utility assistance, 211 draws on a directory of more than 2,700 continuously updated programs and agencies. But right now, all of that is being pushed to its limit. With more on United Way's mission during the shutdown, let's bring in Milton Little Jr., President and CEO of United Way of Greater Atlanta. Milton, it's great to have you this morning. We really appreciate you joining us. We'll just start with the state of 211 right now amid the shutdown. What kind of need are you seeing?
We're seeing tremendous needs, and thank you for having us on today. Every year we see needs, just like you described, requests for food, for rental assistance, for job assistance, all of those numbers just going through the roof. And now you've got added to it the federal workers who are laid off. We're seeing more than 10 calls a day just from federal workers, and I know that number is going to increase, sadly.
Yeah, 10 calls a day. What exactly are they asking for when they give 211 a call?
So they're asking for food. Where's a food pantry? They're asking for rental assistance or mortgage assistance. Those numbers are going up. We're seeing numbers go up in the category of job search assistance and job access. And so the things that we typically see, those numbers are just going up.
Tell us a little more about 211 for folks who aren't familiar. Who is going to be on the other end of that line if they give it a call? And what are the hours of operation?
So we've got highly trained people who answer the calls. One of them told me the other day that she's not heard the levels of desperation that she's hearing now. 211 handles more than 300,000 calls a year. And so for somebody to say they're hearing levels that they don't understand and haven't experienced before tells you just what's going on. So they're highly trained, and they walk people through some of their most desperate requests. Somebody calls up and says, my child hasn't eaten. Where can I go for help? Those are the kind of calls that they answer with compassion and allowing the caller to keep their dignity. It operates 24 hours a day because we've got technology, AI and chatbots that allow after hours callers to still get the help they have need, even if they don't get to talk to a call operator.
It's great tapping into AI to help these folks out when they need it most, even if it's in the middle of the night. You know, we often talk about safety nets. Do you see 211 as one of the last lines of defense when other systems start to break down?
You know, it's the last line of defense, but I also like to think of it as a resource for somebody who's trying to get ahead of a problem. You know, it's sometimes people don't call because they're feeling shame. I wish they'd reverse that and say, here's the best way for me to ensure the well-being of my family, and how can I do that proactively with one of the community's most important resources? That's the way we look at 211, and that's the way a lot of people respond to it.
So if you could speak directly to a federal worker right now, I know you said they make up a majority of your calls right now. Or correct me if I'm wrong, is it the majority or just a lot of them right now?
It's one of the highest rates of increase.
Thank you. Okay, so if you could speak to those federal workers or maybe a single parent waiting on a delayed benefit check right now, what would you say?
I know many of you have never had to call an agency for help. You don't know where to go. You don't know how to bring your family's needs to an organization that's in the business of helping. Well, let me tell you, 211 is here for you. You will call 211, a simple number. You'll be able to talk to a compassionate call operator, and that assistant will walk you through some of the most difficult choices you've ever had to make, but you'll find the help you will need on the other end of that line.
Milton Little Jr. from the United Way, you guys are doing great work there, and please thank the call takers for us too. They're on the front lines helping folks out.
We will. Thanks for your kind wishes.
Hey, you're watching The Take. We'll be right back. Georgia's youngest learners are feeling the fallout from the federal government shutdown. Head Start programs across the state are running out of funding, some already suspending services, others surviving on emergency loans to stay open. So what does this mean? Well, it means thousands of children could lose access to early education, meals, and care their families depend on. Joining us now is Ellen Cochran, President and CEO of Quality Care for Children, to talk about how child care providers are coping and what's at stake for working moms and dads. Ellen, great to be with you. An important conversation today. What are you hearing from parents this week, especially those who are unsure if their kids will have a safe place to go?
Yes, with the federal shutdown, we had 6,500 children in Georgia that were at risk of losing their child care November 1st. And as you said, we did have 5,000 of those that were supported with an emergency loan from the Community Foundation for those in Atlanta. But down in Southeast Georgia, one of our Head Start providers, Action Pact there, serves nearly 600 children who lost care on Monday. And so we are hearing from families who are really needing that care. We're talking about our most vulnerable families here in Georgia that need to find care. And so we've been working with those families. We reached out to our child care providers in the 12 counties impacted by the shutdown of Action Pact. And we've found 37 providers who have reached out to us saying, we have slots, we will be willing to take them if we can find the funds to help those children bridge that care at those centers.
Is there enough space for all the kids in Georgia? I'm thinking I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old currently in daycare. We're both working parents. I can't imagine if they were sent home tomorrow and what we'd have to do. But that's the reality so many are facing right now. So what options are out there for most of these families?
Yeah, well, for the families particularly impacted in Southeast Georgia, there are not enough slots to serve all of them, and we don't have enough funds to give scholarships to everyone. But we are trying to work with those families to connect them to care and raise scholarships for them. There is just not enough supply available due to shortages of teachers and the high cost of childcare, which is important. Quality care costs a lot in the state. And so we are really working to make sure that families are connected to care by referring them to our qualityrated.org site to find childcare that's available in communities. And we at Quality Care for Children are, of course, fundraising to connect them to that care and make sure that families can find care that works for them. This disruption, as you can imagine, as a parent, losing your childcare so suddenly, it really takes people away from work, from what they need to do to support their families. And this comes at a time when SNAP benefits are not available. Most of these families impacted in Southeast Georgia are also receiving those federal benefits for food insecurity. And so having this happen at the same time is really detrimental to families and to the children in their care.
Yeah, talk about some of that disruption and what the uncertainty does to the kids themselves who may not truly understand what's going on in D.C.
Yeah, well, families don't get caught up in the politics. Families get caught up in, I need a safe, stable place for my children to be in care. And so, as you can imagine, children and families have strong relationships with their child care providers. And we are called in to provide these emergency child care to new locations, to the disruption to these children to have to leave their quality care and have to look for new locations. That creates, even though these child care providers are incredible by trying to provide these short-term placements, what's best for these kids is to be in that quality, safe, nurturing environment that they've created with their teachers at their current location.
You put a lot of trust into the people who care for your kids when you leave them for 8 hours a day. If this shutdown drags on, what do you think that this does to long-term trust that families have in Georgia's early learning system?
Look, families need quality childcare so they can work. And so when you become dependent on something for your family, when it is taken away, it is disruptive to the entire family and to our employers, to our communities. And so this is a basic need for our families, which should be a public good. And so one of the things that we know is that there's just no replacement for what kids need in terms of their high quality childcare. And it is our job to make sure that families have access to that care, particularly our most vulnerable children.
A lot of ripple effects, no doubt. Ellen Cochran, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Well, let's take a live look outside from our camera indicator right now. Beautiful blue skies as you see the Atlanta skyline off there in the distance. I mean, not a cloud. A great day to get out there and enjoy a beautiful fall afternoon. In fact, could be about 50 degrees right now and a little bit of a warm up coming our way later. When it gets this cold, you often think about what? Flu season. And while health experts say this year's wave should be moderate, they're urging all of us not to let our guard down. Joining us now is Dr. Jody Guest, professor of epidemiology at Emory University, to break down what we can expect and why getting that shot early still matters. Dr. Guest, great to be with you. So moderate, is that what we're hearing this year? What does that mean for us?
Sure. So last year's flu season was terrible. It was really an awful one. A lot of deaths were associated with flu. And so the prediction is that this year's will be moderate. We tend to not have really, really hard flu seasons back to back.
What strains are you seeing circulating right now, and how well does this year's vaccine appear to match them?
We're still not clear because the flu season is just kicking off, but we have most of the flu strains are what we had last year as well, H1N1. But I do want to be very clear that that does not mean your flu shot from last year protects you this year because of waning immunity. So you need to make sure you get a shot again this year.
What's your biggest concern as we head into the heart of flu season, and anything giving you the most optimism at this time? I know it's early.
Yeah, my biggest concern is the lack of interest in people getting a flu shot. Last year, our children had less than 50% of them were vaccinated, and that was down 20% from the 2019 season. And so that is a real concern. 280 kids died last year in the United States from the flu. So we need to take this very, very seriously.
Is that just because, do you attribute that to some of the widespread skepticism we're seeing right now in vaccines, or is there something bigger at play here?
It is largely that. We have a lot of pandemic fatigue still, but our increasing disinformation about vaccines is swirling everywhere out there, and we need to make sure we're really meeting that head on and making sure that what we're talking about is we want everyone to be safe and healthy.
All right, so you talked about just how bad last year was. What kind of lessons can we take away from that flu season that can perhaps help reduce hospitalizations this time around? Anything outside of just making sure as many people as possible get the shot?
You know, those who died last year, and unfortunately the numbers are not confirmed, but it's somewhere between 40 to 100,000 adults died of the flu last year in the United States. This is a vaccine preventable illness. So we want to make sure that we're thinking both about our personal protection, but also, you know, those that we love and who we're with, and we don't want to spread the flu to them. But we also need to be very clear that with the CDC having issues with funding and the federal shutdown, we're also largely in the dark at the moment about numbers. And so we're very dependent on individual states or individual health departments telling us about the number of cases. We don't have the national surveillance we normally have to watch as well.
Yeah, I just walked right into my neighborhood CVS a couple weeks ago and got it right then and there. Didn't even have to wait. I mean, it's pretty accessible, is it not? Is it as easy as just finding the neighborhood CVS or Walgreens these days?
It is. And, you know, the hours are good. And so depending on how your work hours are, there should be appointments available for you. And, you know, a CVS, a Walgreens, Publix, all of them have the flu shot. And all of them have walk-ups, as well as you can book your appointment in advance.
It's a good time to get it too as we head into the holidays, but is it ever too late in the season to benefit from a flu shot? And how late does the season actually go?
So the peak season begins usually in February, and so we want most people to get their flu shots in October and November, and that is so that your body can mount its immune response and have it at its peak at the time when we see the majority of the flu cases. But it is not too late to get your flu shot. Now is the right time to do it. If you can do it before Thanksgiving, that would be really preferable, again, so you have the best coverage possible by the time we hit February.
Dr. Jody Guest from Emory getting us ready for flu season. Thank you so much for your time. And we have plenty more in store for you coming up. This is The Take. Welcome back. Stocks this morning mostly in the red, and a lot of it's centering around Tesla. CNN's Maribel Aber joins us now from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square in New York. Maribel, good morning. You know, I guess it's a reminder today that stocks don't always move in one direction, but what's the news about Tesla and Elon Musk today?
Let's break it down, Dan. So Norwegian investment firm NBIM is rejecting Elon Musk's proposed $1 trillion pay package. It says it will vote no at this week's Tesla shareholder meeting. So the investment firm is one of the company's largest investors. And this payout would come entirely in stock and depend on Tesla hitting a series of performance goals over the next decade. NBIM says, look, it respects Musk's visionary achievements, but calls the compensation excessive and risky. So in terms of how the market's moving, you said there was a lot of red. Indeed, there is. Here at NASDAQ, we're down about 311 points. The Dow is down 316, and the S&P down 64, Dan.
Okay, we'll be watching that closely. You know, $38 billion. That's a lot of money. Doesn't necessarily buy a pizza party, but it buys an AI infrastructure empire, right?
Yes, this deal, OpenAI signing a $38 billion deal with Amazon Web Services. This is according to CNBC. So this is the first major partnership between ChatGPT maker, and the largest cloud provider. The deal gives OpenAI access to Amazon's advanced chips to train and deploy AI models. Now, the first phase will use existing AWS data centers with plans to expand infrastructure in the future. OpenAI had an exclusive cloud agreement with Microsoft until January, when the two agreed to let OpenAI partner with other providers. Now, Microsoft maintains first right of refusal on new requests. But Dan, you know, OpenAI keeping its dance cards open.
Yeah, and Amazon having a pretty incredible week with its stock price. Let's talk about Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving dinner for 10, but you're telling me it's priced like takeout for 1. I'm very interested here.
Okay, so grocery chain Lidl is rolling out a Thanksgiving meal deal to feed 10 people for just, get this, $36, Dan. It tops Walmart's 10-person turkey and sides bundle by $4. Now, Lidl's offering centers on a 14-pound turkey with all the fixings, including russet potatoes, mac and cheese, and Hawaiian sweet rolls. This year's prices, it's nearly $10 off what Lidl offered last year and $30 less than its 2023 deal. So the company CEO says It wants to make a traditional Thanksgiving accessible to families struggling on tight budgets. That $36 package is available tomorrow through November 26th. Now, it's great, Dan. You just need someone to cook.
Exactly, and it's not me. We'll see how long that lasts on the shelves, by the way. I could see a mad rush for that in the coming days. All right, well, last thing I want to talk about, this is something I can get behind. A bit of a makeover happening to Krispy Kreme's pastry lineup.
Okay, Krispy Kreme is adding 9 new flavors to its menu. They include New York cheesecake, cinnamon apple filled, chocolate fudge brownie, and the Biscoff cookie buttercream. Okay, some flavors are returning fan favorites. Others were once limited time seasonal offerings like pumpkin spice cake. The new 9 were chosen after a year of testing and feedback. Now, on the flip side, Dan, 3 flavors are being bumped from the lineup: glazed blueberry, glazed lemon filled, and cake batter. The company says, they could return sometime in the future. The new donuts are available in stores now or online via the website or Krispy Kreme app. Dan, see, I'm usually an OG glaze person. In fact, I just had a glazed cruller today.
What?
It's empty, as you can tell. I'm kind of sad about the lemon one, though. I hope it comes back.
Okay, all right, that's your thing. You see, I'm more of just eggs and bacon, but I mean, if I was in New York, I'd be getting the bagels and schmear every morning.
Oh, and I'll tell you where the place is. We'll go when you come.
All right, it's a deal. Maribel, thank you so much for your time. Plenty more in store for you coming up. This is The Take. As Ukraine braces for another harsh winter under fire, new Russian attacks are targeting power grids and pushing civilians deeper into crisis. But amid the destruction, faith and resilience endure. Here now is Pastor Marina Serdetenko, a spiritual leader of Odessa People's Church and head of the Good Samaritan Foundation. She's been in Atlanta this week sharing firsthand accounts of the humanitarian struggle and hope that's still alive in Ukraine's front lines. Really appreciate you joining us here in the U.S. today. You've seen, no doubt, the pain and resilience of your people up close. Any moment from this war that stands out to you most?
The eyes of soldiers, the eyes of their wives, the eyes of the kids is the most deeply thing I ever saw. I'm a military frontline chaplain and serve on the front line exactly. And when you talk with a human who lost hope, with a person who lost childhood, with a kid who who are not a kid anymore, it's very hard for understanding.
You talk about looking into their eyes and how they've lost hope, lost childhood.
Right.
What do you say
That's
to them
right.
to make sure they don't also lose their faith?
That they say for people who trust, they send for people who believe that we have a future. They send for me and my family personally, not in general, but personally. They have people who support them and that we are not alone in our fighting. Because for the person who are there to understand that he's not alone, it means a lot.
Marina,
and the main treasure we have, it's a life.
I'm sorry to cut you off there. I want to hear about the Good Samaritan Foundation. I know it's just been such a lifeline in Odessa and beyond. What are people most in need of right now, specifically as winter sets in? We know it's especially tough at that time.
Oh, unfortunately, the rockets, the Shaheds in our region, they destroy our infrastructure. And it's about electricity, about water, about heating, just the regular basic things people need for winter, to survive. And I think this is the most hard thing to understand, that you can be 1 or 2 weeks with no electricity at all. But you need to continue to work. You need to continue to give education for the kids and to just try to survive. But at all the time medicine, at all the time these physical things, but hope and support is very important. Hope and support.
What made you decide to come to Atlanta? Why the city, and what do you hope folks here in Atlanta take away about what Ukrainians are living through right now?
We, in our Good Samaritan Charity Foundation, we work more than 33 years, and we try to be the one who keep the hands up for those who need it more than ever. And we have very good friends helping Ukraine, US, and they help us to serve people on the front line, villages, cities, and families there. And we came to say thank you for those who support us and who stand with us, because we continue to fight. We continue to stand. And I don't know if it's like the line that we crossed already, or we are close to the finishing of these horrible things, our reality around us, the war, I mean, but we know that we are not alone. And people who are here in Atlanta, they are much closer to us than our neighbors. And it means a lot. It's not about a distance. It's not about a finances. It's about a humanity. It's about a heart, from heart to heart. And surprise, we found this support here in your city, in your beautiful city, Atlanta.
It's Southern hospitality, and we're glad you felt the love that so many of us feel from our own neighbors at times. You know, when this war finally ends, what kind of country and what kind of people do you believe Ukraine will have become?
We believe we will still have freedom in everything. For us, it's very important to stay free and to have this freedom and to keep this faithfulness, to be in our country with our wishes, with our dreams, and to not be under something or someone, because we know we remember our 30 years, 40 years ago, the Soviet Union. We don't want to go back there. We don't, and we fight for this. If we fight for freedom and to have opportunity to do what we want to do on our land, we will be happy to do the same next years.
Marina Serduchenko, thank you so much, and we're keeping you in our thoughts and prayers as you head back to that region. Thank you. Coming up next, my final take. Before we go, my final take. Today's election in Georgia might not feel flashy. No governor on the ballot, no senators, no president. But this election today still very much matters. The races today will help decide the things you see every day. Roads, schools, even how much you pay for gas and electricity. Despite the importance of all that, history tells us these off-year elections usually see lower turnout. According to the Center for Civic Innovation, Atlanta saw fewer than a third of voters cast their ballots in the last two off-year elections. Compare that to last year's presidential election when turnout was double. That means the people who do show up today will likely have a louder voice, like a big fish in a small pond. And at the end of the day, voting, no matter the election, remains one of the most powerful ways to shape the future of our communities. 11Alive will be live streaming election results starting at 7 o'clock tonight, and our own Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant will provide extensive coverage of the races here in the metro and across the country. There are some big ones we're watching elsewhere. Again, that starts tonight at 7 right here on 11Alive Plus. We'll have a packed night for you, and we hope to see you then after you hopefully make it out to the polls today if you haven't already voted early. It's great to be with you here on The Take. You'll see Chesley back here again tomorrow. Take care, everybody.